Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Startup Talk, broadcasting from Cal State Fullerton in Fullerton, California. We are available in 130 countries, and I'm always aware that when I make any local reference, the people in Ecuador may not know exactly where we are. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton, the creator of two incubators where we launch startups, and I also founded an angel investment fund called Titan Angels. It's my pleasure today to welcome Jerry Conrey to the show. Hey, Jerry.
Hi, JJ.
Yeah, so Jerry is the founder and owner of Conrey Insurance Brokers and Risk Managers. And I think you could safely call it one of Southern California's fastest growing mid-size insurance brokers. It's a business that Jerry's going to tell his story about starting and growing and thriving. And I'm sure that there were hurdles along the way.
Just a few.
Just a few, right. So let's kind of just kick it off with a few questions. So why did you do this? What was there? What did you have in mind?
At the time I was going to school at Cal State Fullerton, and I was considering what I wanted to do when I was done, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to do any more school. So I was looking at industries in finance or in real estate, so mortgage banking, real estate, insurance, and I ended up settling on insurance after meeting a few people from the industry and really being motivated by seeing the success that they had, the cars they drove, the clothes they wore, and they explained to me how when you sell a house, you get commission once, but if you sell an insurance policy, you earn commission every time it renews. And that just rang true for me. And so I looked at it as a career, especially built on something that everybody needs. And why not get it from somebody like me?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because when people come to me and say, hey, JJ, by the way, I'm called JJ a lot, what do you think I ought to do? And so it's like when you're exploring these opportunities, my advice would be, find situations where it looks like you fit in. You see others as you would like to see yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like if you're interviewing for a company and there's no one like you there, what does that tell you?
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah. So for a agency, that's the proper term to refer to you?
Actually, we're a brokerage.
Brokerage.
And there is a difference.
Okay, tell me.
Where an agency represents an insurance company, okay, a broker represents the client. And so I represent my clientele to the entire marketplace, where an agent represents an insurance carrier to a client. It's fiduciarily different. One, it owes their responsibility to the insurer, that's the agent, and the other owes the responsibility to the customer, which is the broker, and I align better with that.
I got it. And then your customer, it could be an individual, it could be a business as well?
Absolutely. And about 2/3 of my revenue comes from businesses, but all businesses are owned by people. And so I recognize that for us to be a full-service organization, we offer protection to both.
So on the consumer side, is there a profile, like a sweet spot of your customer?
So recently, our organization went through some effort to define who our who is. And I had read a book by Robert Bloom called The Inside Advantage, and in it, it helps you to define what your particular inside advantage of your organization is. And it's really designed less for startups and more for businesses that have over time evolved, and that maybe you want to define your unique and beneficial service, the thing that differentiates you from everybody else that's in the marketplace. But startups at the same time would benefit from being able to clearly define how they're going to differentiate, right? And so I read this book and it said, well, you've got to define who your who is. And I thought, well, I know who my who is. I have over 4,000 of them. But the reality was that it took us 3 weeks of constantly getting together 1 or 2 hours a week with a group of 4 or 5 people to define who our who is. And so we represent it now as successful individuals that expect and appreciate a deeper level of expertise and ingenuity applied to their risk management and insurance solutions, resulting in one less thing they need to worry about. That's who our who is. Somebody who would appreciate services that would raise the level of expectation, and then they can just settle knowing that it's being taken care of.
Cool. Now, I'd like to actually drill just a little deeper with that. So is there a demographic, a persona for your customers? So I'm proudly a baby boomer, and my relationship with my attorney, my insurance provider, my CPA is something I cherish.
Right.
Are other people like that? Or I think of the buy now, the little lizard, on TV and things like that.
Yep. So the insurance marketplace is currently separated by those carriers that directly sell policies to customers, like a lizard company, okay, and then there are those that have agents who represent only them, like certain of your larger companies that you're real familiar with, and then you have the brokers who represent multiple companies to whoever the client happens to be. But defining that client really is going to depend on who it is in the organization that is representing the organization at that time. I have multiple agents that work at my agency or my brokerage, and they all have defined their client a little bit differently. But for me to define it as Jerry Conrey, the owner of the agency, it would be somebody somewhere between 40 and 55, 60 years old, okay, who has acquired assets over time that they're looking for a solution to properly protect, that have something worthy of protecting. And then we look at the subject and then we determine what the exact best way to solve that problem is. But we also manage risk. So it isn't just that we find insurance policies that transfer protection from the risk holder to a carrier, but we also help to mitigate risk through best practices and advising. So we truly are advisors. So you would be somebody that would appreciate us because we're in that tight circle that typically involves a CPA, an attorney, and we're there to be that third. That's risk management, where the other is tax and accounting, and the other is legal. And the three end up being that tripod of advisors. Mm-hmm. And then there's other advisors too, but most folks have those 3 advisors.
So if I'm your customer, and this is on the consumer side, how often would we talk?
Well, our best practice is no less than annually. And it's really important that we set a baseline, just like in medicine, mm-hmm. and then we want to verify what's evolved since the last time we were there. And we look at the delta, and then we determine whether or not coverage needs to be revised. And we also ask ourselves, are there better ways of mitigating risk? And so we like to do an annual check-in. It's hard to do that with 4,000 policyholders, but we endeavor to do it, and we've got 15 people that help make that possible.
So I heard your comment that the small business owner, well, those are people too, right?
Right.
And so I suppose many of the same principles apply. or maybe not. Maybe there's a difference with you and your relationship with the small business.
The truth is that everything's blending anymore. I mean, it's a pretty rare thing to find a sole proprietor, but 25 years ago, it was almost everybody was a sole proprietor in the small business world. And now we're starting to see entities that own residences instead of individuals. So the lines are starting to blur, and products are having to evolve, and the forms are having to evolve because the risk is very different. And we're just an organization that tries to stay on the edge of that and on top of it, so that as it evolves, we're there to advise and to recommend new solutions.
Yeah, one more thing about your customers, and this is exactly what we talk about in the classroom, by the way, is who is your customer? I mean, who is your customer really, right?
Right.
And you define it down. So geographically, are you restricted to California? Do you prefer to do business locally?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. We're actually, as an agency, I think we're licensed in 19 or 20 states. But the way that has happened is it's evolved. We don't market outside of our general territory, but we are often at the end of the phone from a referral. About 4 out of 5, in 2018 it was measured, and 4 out of 5 of our new clients came in the form of a referral. And so sometimes referrals come from territories that are not right next door. But as an agency, our focus when we're looking for our next new client, we focus in Southern California. But these days, there's a lot of expansion out of the state, and there's a lot of assets that don't exist within the territory, and there's a lot of reason for that. And when your clients are manufacturers, for instance, they look for redundancy and ways to mitigate against things like a catastrophic earthquake or a hurricane or something like that. And so they will put facilities in geographic places that would be advantageous in the event that there's a need to move operations, or they do it because there is some benefit to gain in lower labor costs or lower material costs or lower facility expenses. Or what if they are a shipper and they ship a lot of stuff? If they don't have to ship all the way across the United States and they can ship in a much closer zone, if they do enough shipping, then it justifies having a second facility. And so as an agency that has been in Orange County all 50 years that we've been in business, we have clientele in 19 states right now.
50 years? I mean, you started it when you were 2 years old? Or?
Yeah, I'm 56. Thank you. I wish I was 52. I remember that year. It was a good year. Yeah, no, I bought the entity in 2002. I've been in the business for 32 years. I started as an agent for a captive company. I spent 7 years as a captive agent or an agent representing one company. And then I became a district manager for that company, and I then managed agents like me. And then I decided that I was 32 years old, I was 37 years old, and just realized that there was more to the insurance world than what one company could offer. And out of the frustration of that, I decided to leave that captive environment and to invest in a brokerage that had an independent agency that had multiple carriers that it could offer solutions for. And when is choice ever a bad thing?
Yeah, right. So it sounds like you did it the right way. So you researched the industry, you get a job, you work, and you learn the business, build up your clientele, your expertise, and then you push the lever to acquire a business. Is the term a book in the business or something like that? I've heard.
So when we talk book, it's usually talking about a segmentation of the total premium under management that the agency manages. So a book might be a producer's book or a department's book, but yes, it's the book.
Yeah.
What I did is I'll try to equate this to your academia, right? So I kind of had a PhD in the world of the company that I had represented.
Right.
But when I became an owner of an independent agency, I had maybe a bachelor's degree, maybe. I learned how much more there was to the insurance world. I learned that carriers had different approaches. I learned that there's different appetites and ways that people solve things and forms that changes. And it just blew my mind how much more option there was. And today, 19 years later, or a little more than 18 years later, I have a great deal of confidence that I understand that marketplace in a very different way. So maybe I've worked up to that PhD now.
There you go. Yeah. I have a buddy who's truly a gifted salesperson, and almost on a whim, he bought an insurance business, and concurrent with that, got his license and started at the same time. And with the business came some talented people, but who's kidding who? It took him 10 years to figure it out.
Yeah, it's no small thing.
And he reflects now that it was a good decision, but he was sweating bullets.
I'm sure. He had to rely heavily on others that were working for him, but were actually leading him. Not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I bet. Well, let's flip the conversation a bit. So let's go. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Hacienda Heights, California.
Okay.
So not that far from Cal State Florida. I've lived in Orange County now since I left Hacienda Heights, which was in 1981, to become a student at Cal State Fullerton. And ever since then, I've been a resident of Orange County. But prior to that, I was a Dodger fan and a Kings fan.
There you go.
And the Angels were who are they? Now they're my little team, and the Ducks are my team, and I'm very much an Orange County guy. But I grew up in Hacienda Heights. I went to Los Altos High School. And there's a lot of Titans that were conquerors at one point in time.
All right, very cool. And so you were, as I recall, pretty active on campus when you were here.
I was. I still am a little bit.
Yeah.
But back then, I was elected to the Associated Students Board of Directors. I became its vice chair. I sat on the faculty council, which became later the academic senate. I sat on the foundation board. I fundraised for Titan Athletics, and I did all of that while going to school. I was also the president of Sigma Alpha Mu fraternity, and I was the vice president of the IFC. Yeah, I had quite a bit of involvement. I had a very, very rich education. I hardly had any time for books.
Sounds like it. Now, you're still very involved in many ways with the university, but also your fraternity, correct?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I'm the national, what they call the vice supreme prior, which is
sounds really good.
It's the executive vice president of the international fraternity. Yeah. I sit on the 8-member board that runs the entire organization.
Yeah. So what is it that what's the value you received as a fraternity member that carries forward to today?
Oh, let me tell you. I learned how to budget. I learned how to organize events. I learned how to market. I learned how to sell. And I learned how to collaborate and negotiate. All those things came through my education as a member of a fraternity, because it's a microcosm of a little business. It's an organization. It has to be run. Mm-hmm. And I had all of that experience, and I just built upon all of that. And each of my little bit of experiences ended up leading me right to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So I don't have that fraternity background, and I can't explain why it didn't happen for me. But it's like the other one that's not in my background, and the show's about you, is I didn't have military service. And I reflect today that I'm missing two important life experiences that others have.
I get it. And for those that do military service, they're some of their best memories from it. I'm sure there's plenty of bad memories, but the best memories from it are the fraternal experience, the brotherhood that is created through teamwork. And fraternity is about team. Mm-hmm. And so and when you find commonality It's amazing how that can collaborate into something far more synergistic. And, the old adage that 1 + 1 = 11 in the world of synergy. And so much more can get accomplished through the combination of people than just individually.
So when you were in high school, were there things that you did, hobbies that you took on that took on a life?
I was a band geek. I was in the percussion section. I wanted to be a drummer, but I was just terrible at it. But I was really, really capable at music, but not to the. I was a generalist, okay, and I wish that I would have really concentrated my effort on one area of music, but I never did because I loved it too much. I ended up playing the xylophone and the vibraphone, which is
really?
a very unique instrument that there's only one of. And that fit my personality well. I love being the only one of something.
Oh, sweet.
And so it both on the band side and the orchestra side, and I even spent a year in drum and bugle corps after college, and which is a very, very unique experience, and maybe 0.5% have the skill set to do it, or the drive and determination, because it's a lot of work. But great memories. So I was a music guy.
Now, do you continue with music today?
I have a little band that I haven't done a thing with for about 3 or 4 years, but it always could be started up. And when the gig or the opportunity arises, we would just get together and go. We have a British invasion music from the 60s and 70s is something that, and I'm a little young for that, but the truth is I love that music because I grew up listening to my parents listening to it. Yeah. And so I love that music, and it represents a very important part of my childhood in a time when life was just simple and easy, and I associate all that music with all that. And to this day, I still have a lot of, I use music technique and style in all of my workings and doings. Collaboration and conducting and staying in tune and on beat. And I use those analogies all the time as I'm working with my staff and with my clients, just making sure that we're in harmony and stuff like that. I use those terms all the time.
Oh, wow.
It's very much a part of my DNA.
Yeah, I get it, although I don't have your skills. My 2 older kids were band kids, and they observed, they told me that, there were kids that were just gifted, that just totally had the DNA to be a musician. But for them, it was repetition, or my daughter would call it mindless repetition. She was an oboe player, a double reed, really difficult.
Very difficult.
And she ended up getting a scholarship at the university level.
That's awesome.
But it was simply through the discipline of it. Now, today, the oboe is in the case on the shelf, but that discipline, I think, really propelled her professionally.
I think that there's a lot to be said about what you're talking about. And musicians and athletes have a lot in common. It's really, and mathematicians. You really think about all of it. It's all about a discipline and a science and a process, and there's a right way to do it. And when it's done right, it's quite perfect.
Love it. So your life as an insurance broker, what is it like?
Well,
I suppose it's different now than it was 20 years ago, right?
It is, only because the risks that I get involved with are much more complicated today. You gain a reputation, and that usually means that the risks and the opportunities that you get to work with start to become more significant. And all that's happened for me over time is that the challenge of what I am trying to help manage in that risk and or represent to the marketplace is just getting a little more complicated, but the process is the same.
I got it. So what are some of the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis?
All right, students of Cal State Fullerton, especially those in the world of business and communications, listen to what I'm about to say. we cannot find enough qualified employees. It's a very well-paying career, significant career, and the opportunities are endless, and the income opportunities are limitless, and yet we struggle to find quality people. So today, in a near perfect employment environment, I think the unemployment rate is 3% or something very close to that. We see very few candidates that actually fit any of the criteria that we're looking for. And so we have to invent them. And so it's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's the biggest challenge.
So what is the criteria? Who are you looking for?
Oh, well, it always helps to have a good education, because what an education provides in our world is proof that somebody can start and finish something. And then the second part of it is that they probably know how to communicate well. And then the third part of it is that they are probably capable of doing normal math. And so with a degree, you qualify from a foundational standpoint. Then from there, personality comes into play. If they're going to be in sales, they have to have the ability to communicate in an effective way. If they're going to go into underwriting, they have to be analytical. If they're going to go into claims management, they have to be both analytical and empathetic. And, there's just all these different paths within the world of insurance. But I don't know why. No one thinks that insurance is sexy. I don't get it. It's an unbelievable industry that continues to grow and grow and grow. But it's very rare that I go to and talk at a high school or a junior high and somebody says to me, I want to be an insurance agent. I never hear those words.
I would suggest part of it's just awareness. They don't know. And even the world of sales, when you're in college, most students don't understand it, right? And so much of my career, other than this last chapter where you know me, I've been salesman, sales manager, VP of sales, and positively loved the career for all the reasons you were describing previously. Yet when I was a student, I not that I was repulsed by selling, I just didn't understand it. So
I think it can be scary.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot that fear often is based on what people don't understand rather than what they do understand. And for us, we break sales down to a process. And when it is a process, it is far more predictable in an outcome than you would believe. And so after 32 years in the business, I can tell you how many calls turn into appointments, how many appointments turn into sales, what the average sales size is if you're working in certain industries and certain territories. But there is not everybody is interested in insuring stuff. Some people like to insure people, okay, and do more financial services. That's also an arm of insurance that our agency represents, but it's not my area of specialty. There are others in my organization that have that. But I'm just saying to those titans out there that happen to be hearing this, or anybody else for that matter, our industry is open. And it is looking for qualified people. And when I say qualified people, it's foundational qualification, not experiential. We're actually less interested in highly experienced people in the world of insurance, because if they're available, they're probably coming to us with problems that we have to correct and change. And so I'd much rather work with a blank slate than one that I have to shake that Etch-a-Sketch.
Got it. So returning to the business, but it might also apply to your employees. So how do you guys make money? What's your business model?
So 95% of my revenue comes in the form of commission paid by the insurer for which I've placed cover. And so let's say ABC company buys an insurance policy for its fleet of autos, and it's $10,000 in premium. that insurer would probably compensate us somewhere in the 15% range. And so we would earn $1,500 in that transaction. But we're not just paid $1,500 for selling the policy. We're also paid $1,500 to service that policy so that the client has somebody they're familiar with that they could talk to. And I have to be honest with you, insurance companies talk in one language and most consumers talk in another. And the one job of an insurance broker is to be that compiler, the one that can take the information in as said by one and convert it into language the other one understands. And that I think we're paid pretty handsomely for.
Cool. So what makes your brokerage different or better?
Well, it's hard to ask me what makes my brokerage better, but my clients have told me that our biggest differentiator is the way that we convey our care and that we engage the client more deeply in the way we fact find and underwrite. And by doing that, they have a greater sense of confidence that they are properly insured. And there is quite a value, JJ, in peace of mind. And it's the cornerstone of who we are. And it's the thing that we endeavor to accomplish in every interaction and transaction. And because we work from that mindset, most people feel a little bit of difference.
You got a recent success story you could talk about, maybe where you solved a problem? Anything come to mind?
Well, so those people who are familiar with California are familiar with the fact that we get high winds. And from those high winds, if they are western bound, if they are coming from the desert to the ocean, they carry high temperature and low humidity. And that combination is very, very, very dangerous, and it creates wildfire. And in 17 and 18, the 2 years combined, over $20 billion was lost in fires that wiped out tens of thousands of homes and businesses throughout the state. And the marketplace has gotten very, very difficult for folks who happen to, maybe they've worked all their life for a house that has a view, and now no insurer wants to write it because it's in a place that makes it more susceptible to fire. So our biggest wins right now are our market knowledge and the relationships that we have with carriers. And by having those relationships, we're able to solve people's problems. And nothing makes me feel better than when a client tells me how much they appreciate the fact that they got introduced to us. That's our win. We are never going to be the ones that pat ourselves on the back. We're always going to wait for somebody else to do it for us because we're always looking at the way we transact and wondering what we could have done better. And I think that that's a hallmark to who we are.
Yeah, interesting. I had a tragedy because of the high winds just a few weeks ago. So I've got a horse property with a few acres, and I have an antique outhouse in the back. And the winds blew the door off. It was a tragedy, and I'm afraid it's not covered by my insurance. But nonetheless, it hurt. Yeah.
I don't know why it's not covered. It would just mean that you didn't have a form that covers wind damage. Okay, it could have been covered.
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously joking, but that's a true story.
Right.
But I was reading the other day that the average house fire is done in like 17, 18 minutes, some unbelievably quick time. Because of the way construction is today and the fact that our furniture, our drapes, and our carpets are so combustible. It's just a frightening thing. I think of all the worries I have, the nightmares, fire would be it, unequivocally.
I get it, but I will tell you, fire is not the thing that concerns insurers the most. The thing that concerns insurers the most is water losses. If you're talking about property world, it's water losses, and there's a lot of infrastructure that was built in the 70s and the 80s that was that materials were imported, and they weren't as good as the materials that existed before. And we're seeing a lot of slab leaks caused by pinholes in copper because the copper that was used was not the best quality of copper, and the process wasn't the best quality. But the problem is that these are things you can't look at and see. You don't know you're going to have a loss till you've had it. There's really nothing you could actually do to prevent it. So it's frustrating to insurers because the average water loss today is a $9,000 or $10,000 loss, and that's a pretty big number when you look at the average homeowner's policy, about $900.
You bet. You bet. So you're involved in the community here at Cal State Fullerton, and you've been a mentor in the classroom for many years.
I have.
Tell me about that.
Well, many years ago, it was 2002, I had bought my agency, and I'd received this invitation from Mike Ames, who was a professor. I believe he's a retired professor now. Is that right? He's
Since
emeritus?
2007. Right,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
But at the time, he ran the entrepreneurship program. And he had put a letter out saying, hey, you can have students advise. And I thought, what a good idea. I can get a business plan that can help me focus on maybe something that they discover about the agency that they think that I could kind of center my focus on. I was in the first year of ownership, and I decided to throw my hat in the ring. So a group of students came out and involved themselves in my agency. And when I got my report, I wasn't all that impressed with it, to be honest with you. I don't know what Mike gave it for a grade, but he wasn't impressed either. But what it did was it motivated me to offer my services as a mentor to help Mike in the classroom make that experience better for the customer. While Mike was focused on the students, I was focused on the customer. And the combo ended up being a very, well, you tell me, how many of those do you have now?
Yeah, we're doing about 100 a year, 100 projects.
Right. And there's a mentor on every one of them now, right?
And I expanded the mentor effort because I saw the incredible value that people like you brought to the students.
Well, I look at the professor and I think philosophical. And I look to the entrepreneur or the mentor and I think practical. And how often do you get a philosophical expert and a practical expert there to co-advise at the same time?
Almost never.
Almost never.
Yeah.
I would think that the experience would be such that the student would be enriched by the process. And for 16 of the last 18 years, I have done at least a semester of mentorship in the entrepreneurship program.
I want to ask you, I want to come back to mentoring, but one of the other things that you do, the way you give back, is you have a scholarship.
My wife and I provide a $3,500 a year scholarship to an outstanding junior in the entrepreneurship program. And where other scholarships focus on just academia, I weigh academia, but I also weigh involvement. I weigh the way this person, the student, is able to inculcate both experience and education and do it effectively. And so I kind of looked at the kind of experience I had and was looking for others that have a similar experience. And so I think it's a kind of popular scholarship in that I think more people qualify for it. And we tend to get quite a few applicants. I hope that this year is a record breaker.
Right, cool. And it means a lot, $3,500 to a student here. That's huge money and really makes a difference. I'm really grateful for that.
You know, we've done 11 scholarships over the years, and every one of them went on to graduate a year later. Every one of them graduated with honors. Okay, and I am still in touch with every single one of them.
Neat. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Returning to mentoring, so that's a gift from you to the students. Do you have mentors, and could you tell me about one of them, or?
So I'm more mentoring these days, but I still, first of all, let me be very clear. It may sound selfless to go into the classroom and be a mentor, but there is a selfish side to it too. I get to see contemporary things, new apps being utilized for collaborative purposes that I wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. Understanding the way that the student interacts, what it takes to attract people of that age, because I've already told you one of the biggest challenges is talent, and so there's the selfish part of it too. So when I can gain and give, and everybody wins, that's a good why.
I got it. So, a couple minutes about your company. How would you describe the culture of your brokerage?
Culture is really important. You can't dictate culture. You can't write a culture statement and say that this is culture. And culture trumps nearly everything else.
I think Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
It does. It does. It doesn't matter what your strategy is. If you do not have the right culture for growth, you're going to struggle. And so at Conrey Insurance Brokers, I would hope that asking others what our culture is that we're an environment of constant learning. We're an environment of constant development, that we're in an environment where we put the client first, and that we put our people before we put profits. That would be a good way to describe our culture. But don't get me wrong, I live in a nice house and I drive a nice car, and we're a successful business, and I believe it's because we put our employees first that we end up with that kind of result.
I get it. Are there things that keep you up at night?
Absolutely. It's what I call my 3 a.m. conversations, usually with myself. Yeah, sure. Economy, politics, regulations, these are all variables and factors that I can't control.
Out of your control, right? Yeah.
I have a controlling sense in that if I feel like if I've got my hands on the wheels, that I can manipulate whatever it is that I'm driving successfully through whatever the course happens to be. But the minute people start throwing things at me that I can't control, I have to just accept that I can't control it. It's taken many years to get there, JJ. Okay, many years. And in some ways, I'm still not there. I'm still learning. I'm still a student.
Yeah. There's a book called The Black Swan, and the premise of the book is the things that happen to us as individuals and in society that are unforecasted have the highest impact. And of course, the example in recent history was 9/11. We didn't anticipate that, and it's the whip-like change that's gone through our culture with social media, with security, with the internet is just catastrophic. And no one had guessed, well, at least I don't know of anyone who had guessed that would happen.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
In much the same way. What's the one of the best feelings you have? And I'll restrict to the business if I could.
Okay.
Yeah, just what's the biggest victory or most satisfying event?
Probably when you see somebody you hire in that comes in a startup role, okay, and who evolves into a key role. I don't have any children. My business, I hope to perpetuate through layers of management that I'm developing right now.
Right.
And I'm starting to see members of my organization who can emerge into the role of a principal. And I don't know whether to be 1 or 2 or 3, but yeah, that is very satisfying. It's also very satisfying when a client just picks up the phone after a loss, after the experience through claims, and says, "Thank you."
Wow. Yeah.
You know, our whole goal is to return them to where they were prior to the loss. And when done right, insurance should look exactly like that.
Yeah, I love that. And I too, so with today I take satisfaction in the students that graduate, the new ventures that are created, and in my corporate career, it was exactly what you described, hiring someone and mentoring them and then having them blossom. Oh, that one of the most incredible feelings I can think of.
Right now, over the years, my business centered around me as the primary rainmaker. But in the last 2 years, collectively, they've equaled me. And in this last year, they actually outperformed me. And the competitive side of me is like, okay, now I got to double down. But the truth is that I go to bed at night kind of smiling and thinking to myself, you're accomplishing what you actually set out to do.
Yeah. So with your success, professionally, personally, if you had to describe it as one thing, like a superpower, what might that be?
My ability to connect and to analytically think. I would be nowhere with either of those.
Mm-hmm. All right, very cool. So we've talked quite a bit here, and I know we've been talking about this for a few weeks. Are there questions that questions that I didn't ask you that maybe I should have? That's
You mean today?
Yeah, today. That's always a tough one to answer, by the way.
Well, I'm married.
Tell us about it.
I'm married. I'm in my 22nd year of marriage. I married a physician. She and I live in North Tustin, and when we married, we were a little older in life. She was 7 years my senior, and so we never ended up having children. Although we tried, it just never came to be. And so we are like uncles to those that are truly our nephews and nieces, and then we are uncles to our friends' children as if they're our own nephews and nieces. And it's a great role in life to play. Uncle Jerry is a title I will never give up to anyone.
Sweet. And I have met Vicki, and she's a delight. And I wonder if marrying later in life isn't an advantage. I bet it's. I look at it as being possibly an extraordinary advantage.
Well, I mean, we brought two successful careers together, and probably the biggest challenge in our life has been marrying those two things and honoring it all, honoring the union as well as us as individuals in our own rights. And we've always had a tremendous balance. And, I'll just say this very clearly. It doesn't hurt to marry up. Okay. So I married up. I'm the lucky one. I admit it right up front. Yeah. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Very cool. So you've been most generous with your time here at the university and specifically today. Is there anything that our listeners that we could do to help you?
You know what? Nothing makes me happier than when I read in the paper about success that Cal State Fullerton's having, whether it's on the athletic field or in academics or in research. Recently, there's been a lot of great things that have come out of Cal State Fullerton that they've been a part of something, just tremendous. And so for those listeners that are here as the stewards of what it is to be a Titan today, I just hope they continue to develop more wins and better ways to raise the value of our degree, and to at the same time raise the community. Cal State Fullerton coming into Fullerton and in North Orange County was a very, very important part of who it is today. And this county would look very different if it wasn't here. And I think about the impact that universities have at other places. You have the storied houses. Well, this is a storied house, and it deserves a little more attention than it's gotten. And I met your new president, and I met the vice president of development. And many years ago, Vicki and I put Cal State Fullerton in our will. We did USC as well because that's where she's from, and we just did it. That was something that was important to us. We recognized that we would be nowhere without the education we had gotten, and so we had left. We have in our trust that one of the beneficiaries is Cal State Fullerton. Well, I got to tell you, when I told them this, they had no knowledge that I had done it, and the next thing you know, I am being swept up by the organization, and they're showing me all these great attributes of the university that I didn't even know existed. And in the last 3 months, I have seen 2 or 3 different performing arts events that just blew my mind. And to think that that was going on all the time, and I missed it. Yeah. I didn't know that there was a radio station in the basement of is it Pollock? Is that what it's called? Yeah, Pollock Library. So I'm experiencing new things, and it's fun.
That's really neat. And thank you so much for what you do. If our listeners want to get in contact with you, how might they do that?
Well, we have a website. My last name is Conrey, Conrey, so conreyinsurance.com. They can go to the website. That website is an award-winning website. We invented space in the world of websites for insurance agencies that was recognized with a communicator award, and so they can reach out to us and get a feel for who we are there. They can always call our 877 number and reach us, and 877 450-1872 if they want to call us. But the website's probably the best way.
Okay. All right. Very cool. So thank you, Jerry, from the Center for Entrepreneurship, from our students. And today's guest has been Jerry Conrey of Conrey Insurance Brokers and Risk Managers. Thank you to our listeners. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Also, you can find me at johnbradleyjackson.com. And we will see you soon. All right. Thanks, everybody.